Liz Wheeler is here, host of The Liz Wheeler Show, Monday through Friday, right here, 7 o'clock Eastern on the First TV, and author of the wonderful book, Buy It, Why Have You Not Bought It Yet? Hide Your Children, exposing the Marxists behind the attack on America's kids. Liz, how you doing?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, can't wait to talk about Black Lives Matter with you. No one knows more about the roots of Black Lives Matter than you. But first, big picture, why does Israel matter to America? And why does Israel matter to Christians?
This is a great question and something that Republicans in general should be able to articulate more clearly than we are. Instead of articulating it, we're oftentimes playing defense, trying to parry with the left, who says, well, why are you being hypocrites? Why don't you want to send money to Ukraine, but you want to get involved or support Israel? Israel is incredibly important to the United States for many reasons. First of all, they are our strongest ally in that region. They are surrounded, as we know, by jihadist nations or nations that harbor jihadists, which perhaps that's potato, potato. And without Israel as our strong ally, that entire region would be governed and ruled and oppressed by people who not only want to wipe out the state of Israel, but also want to do the same thing to America should they get the chance to do so. So it's an incredibly important strategic ally that we have in Israel because, again, not to sound too graphic here, but what Hamas did to the Jews in Israel last week, they would and will do to the United States if they can possibly figure out how to infiltrate our shores the way that they did with Israel. Secondly, there's a moral question, Mike, that I think a lot of Republicans are hesitant to talk about. And the moral question here has to do with, okay, it was wrong for Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine. We all agree with that. No one thinks it was the right thing to do. But Ukraine is a corrupt nation. They're one of the most corrupt nations in the world. No one thought Zelensky was anything other than a crook until he, started trotting out before Congress in his costume military fatigues and demanding all of our money all at once, all the time. And this border dispute between Ukraine and Russia isn't something that is based on the inherent right to exist of a certain people. It is literally a border dispute. Again, it doesn't make it right that Vladimir Putin invaded, but the morality of the thing isn't really at its core. It's not the same moral question as Israel. Israel is fighting for their very right to exist. The people of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel, there are people that want to exterminate Jews because they're Jews. It's almost like people nowadays don't understand that. Even though we are less than 100 years past the Holocaust, people around the world, in our country and in other Western nations, don't comprehend that there are radical jihadists, there are Islamists, there are anti-Semites who actually want to murder Jews just because they're Jews. And so we as the United States do have not just a practical obligation to help our ally in the Middle East, but a moral obligation to protect or help protect a people from extermination when what they're facing is a genocidal death cult that hates them based on their religious beliefs.
Yes, well said. You talked about morals a moment ago, morality, Republicans being hesitant to speak like that and to use those words. I was too, before I was a Christian. I don't know how connected these two things are, but they both are true. It was before I was a Christian, and I was more of a libertarian. But I've come to realize now, 11 years on, that every time I was wrong about something, whether it was a border, legalization of marijuana, even pro-life, there's a couple other ones, free trade, a couple other issues, I always took this libertarian approach. And it turned out to be very wrong about all those things. And I've been afraid, used to be afraid to make any sort of moral judgment on anything, that anything's right or wrong or good or bad. And I feel like Republicans are still stuck in that rut. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you're not alone. I mean, what you described is also, my political history. Probably half of the people watching this show either currently still hold libertarian-leaning views, because we all kind of have that inherent government get off my lawn bone in our bodies. Yep. And there's nothing wrong with that. I also leaned libertarian when I was younger because it sounds great. I wish I could be a libertarian today still. It would be awesome if it worked, but it doesn't work. In fact, the Republican Party's embrace of a more libertarian philosophy of liberty and of governance is actually why you see this, for example, the fracture that we see in the speaker race, where Republicans can't even coalesce around electing one of their own to be Speaker of the House for multiple days on end. The reason for that, the reason why Democrats are always so cohesive, And the reason Republicans are always so fractured is because the Republican Party no longer has morals. They no longer have principles. They no longer have an agenda. They no longer have a defined purpose. And I don't say this with particular animosity. I'm not trying to write them off. I'm just saying they're an incredibly important political apparatus that has lost their sense of direction because Republicans have fallen for this idea that we shouldn't have any morals in the public space, whether this is culturally in our civil institutions or whether this is in governmental institutions. They have fallen for the false idea of neutrality, that we should let everyone bring their own beliefs to the public square. We shouldn't make any moral judgments on who's right or who's wrong. It's almost moral relativism, really. And the result of this, of course, there is no such thing as neutrality. You can't have neutrality, especially in government or in civil institutions. And so when Republicans stepped back and relinquished our rightful place, as the stewards of these morals, Democrats were only too happy to swoop in with their sets of ideologies that they disguise as their principles or their political agenda. So what you're speaking to is actually a much larger problem that we're going to continue to face in all kinds of cultural fights.
Awesome. The moral vacuums that exist in our country more than anywhere else is our college campuses. And that's where Black Lives Matter has swooped in with their own moral pronouncements. And no one's better than you on this topic here. And it's been revealing, I think, for a lot of people to see Black Lives Matter's support of Hamas and of a Palestinian state and such. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm not surprised by it. I think evil is always shocking because it should shock our moral conscience, but I'm not surprised given the origins of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, the video that you played at the open of this segment, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, the two women that founded the movement, Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors, have admitted that they are Marxists. They say, we are trained Marxists. Well, Marxism is an inherently anti-life, anti-Christian ideology. It is a religion into itself because under a Marxist government, the people are required to view government as God. And that's why there's an atheistic element to Marxism and communism, because you can't have government as God and God as God. So communists want you to get rid of God and view government as God instead. It does align with their political ideology that they would support those terrorists versus supporting the Jewish state of Israel. And I hate to sound like I'm not surprised by this, but when you compare the root of their beliefs that underpin Black Lives Matter, it is the same type of anti-human beliefs that Hamas espouses.
Yep, and then talk like they're oppressed throughout the whole time. We got about 1 minute, Liz. In all your interviews you've done for your new book, Hide Your Children, what is something that you have not yet talked about out of it that you're just dying to get out? And I wish someone would ask me about this so I can finally talk about this chapter in my book.
Oh my goodness, this is such an unfair question because I've done probably 300 interviews about it, and I'm trying to think if there's anything in it. It's interesting. In the chapter on homeschooling, I do talk about the chapter on homeschooling, and I have on interviews before, so this part isn't new. But when I'm talking about the professors, the Ivy League professors that are behind this effort to preemptively ban homeschooling, one of the parts that's really interesting is not just that these people are very pro-public school, but they are essentially pro-Marxist indoctrination and they want to use the public school system for it. The underpinning of their ideology is anti-parental rights. They don't think that parents have any right to raise their children to share the religious values of the family. They think that that is inherently abusive for parents to teach children their own religious views. And to me, that's one of the most shocking parts. When someone shows their colors, their true colors, as deeply as that, we better take this kind of opposition, this political opposition, and this kind of political enemy very seriously. Because when you hold an ideology that extreme, you're going to go to any lengths to try to impose it on the people around you.
Just to tie this all around, this morning we were homeschooling our 5 and 7-year-old, along with our 3-year-old and 10-month-old. But we talked about the introduction of sin into the world, which was, I think, one of the great dividing lines between the left and the right today is, are people born good or are they born sinful? And it was that belief that really crushed my libertarian views, perhaps more than anything else, just to tie a bow around all of it. Hide Your Children, Exposing the Marxists Behind the Attack on America's Kids. It is by the great Liz Wheeler. Liz, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. I appreciate it.